Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. You can just about see the dog. There she is, the one that you all come to see. I am Sean Butler. I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things you love. It's Friday, a beautiful Friday. The weather is out. There's no transfer news, views or clues today. There really isn't any new transfer stories for me to bring to your attention. So I'm going to go down an opinion editorial, an op-ed route, and I'm going to talk about Ange Postecoglou and why I believe it is more important than ever that Tottenham fans get behind him this summer. Stick to the plan, Batman, regardless of how next season starts. Even if you are Ange out at the moment, even if you are Ange doubt at the moment, I think there's a rationale as to why you have to see this through. You have to give it all the way through next season, even if it's a struggle, because if you want to see a scenario where in 2 or 3 years' time, Tottenham can be attracting players of £100 million value, the world-class talent, then I think this is a process you have to go through. And we're going to talk about it now. Before we do, guys, if you don't mind, if you enjoy this video and the content generally, I'd really appreciate it if you could smash the like button for me. I really don't need to ask because you guys always do it for me anyway, but just a little trigger reminder really helps the channel. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. We're a few souls away from 24K. 25K is the next one. Hopefully just around the corner. And then after that, we reset expectations and we see where we can take this bad boy. And I can't wait to do it with you. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic. Now, I mentioned if you're Ange out or Ange doubt. I'm even going to include the Levy out or the Levy doubt people in this, because on Sunday, I think it was Sunday, maybe it was Saturday, I put out a tweet saying to all the Levy out, the staunch Levy out, genuine, sincere question, what is it you would like to see in a new owner? And I said, please don't say kind of mentality-based wording like ambition, because that's a kind of mindset rather than a real thing. It's not something that's tangible. If ambition is what you mean, then what does that look like? Does it mean, you know, signing world-class players? Does it mean treating the fans with less disdain around season ticket prices and whatever, right? Like, tell me what ambition means. And there was loads of answers, 125 answers. And of course, it always gets a little bit, you know, sticky. But I did get some takeaways from it. I did manage to get some insights. And generally speaking, a lot of the takeaways were around Tottenham signing world-class players. Now, as you know, on this channel, I do talk a lot about FFP and PSR, because I do think it's important. It's a massive part of the bucket of considerations when you're analysing the output of a chairman, is how well they set you up financially. To say anything otherwise is disingenuous. And obviously the rules are in place now, where, I'm not going to go through all the rules again, but in a nutshell, your revenue, the amount of money you generate and the amount of money you spend dictates how much money you're allowed to spend on players in the summer. And as I've said on previous videos recently, I believe that 2 years out of the Champions League will limit our budgets this summer to around somewhere between 110 and 130 million, around 120 million, something like that, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, of net spend. And that's if we push the boundaries. Teams like Chelsea, obviously, you know, front load the risk, get themselves in situations that are difficult in order to get past their challenges. They've had to sell hotels to their own third-party businesses. They obviously took advantage of rules that are no longer in existence around 8-year amortisation, and they front-loaded the risk in a hope that it would work. And it remains to be seen how that will pan out for them, but it's a sticky wicket for them. Tottenham aren't going to do that. You don't have an owner, we don't have an owner who has that appetite for risk. And as I say, I always think that's a slight problem. Not that I want him to be that polar opposite, but a little bit more risk on would be nice. However, you still are limited by what you can spend, right? You just are. So when people say they want world-class players, well, let's just make a general assumption here and say a world-class player costs £100 million. A Declan Rice, an Alex Isak, maybe more than £100 million. If you want those sorts of players, then under the current rules, under our current situation, you can't buy one of them and 7 other players. Now, Ange has said he needs a lot of players coming in, a lot of players going out. As I mentioned before, I do think the outgoing market is going to be difficult this year, as it always is with Tottenham, for 2 reasons. One is Daniel Levy likes to hold on to value. And again, I don't like his approach to negotiations. But even besides all that, we have players that are deadwood to us. And so the teams that will be interested in those players are not the sorts of teams around Europe that has a lot of money. The teams that have a lot of money in Europe are not going to be going after most of our players. Some of them maybe there'll be a bid for, but most of the teams that will be looking at our players will not have a lot of money, and so you have depression in the ability to raise big funds. So it's not easy. It's not easy. My point is it's not easy. It's also not easy when you need to bring in 7 players, 6 players. Ange just said he wants all these players coming in that fit the bill. To me, the reason why I think you have to stick with Ange here, guys, is because if you don't, then we will never get out of this phase 1, because every single new manager that comes in will want their own players. Over the last 5 years, Tottenham's most frustrating period, I believe, since Levy's come in, where there has been a lot of transition in the managerial positions. I think we haven't gone a season without sacking a manager since Pochettino. And of course, on top of that, we have had a very frustrating continuous pivot in philosophy, from project to here now, win now, at least on paper, from attractive football to pragmatic football to defensive football to I don't know what football it was with Nuno. You know, from Pochettino to Mourinho to Nuno to Conte to Ange, it's, you know, you don't really know, one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. And so every one of those managers wanted their own players. Every one of those managers was inheriting a different set of players that had square pegs in round holes for their vision. And of course, you have to also bake in that the average tenure of a manager is 3 times shorter than the average tenure of a player. You know, most players are signed on 4 or 5 year contracts, especially younger ones. Most managers might be signed on that length contract, but ultimately they only last about a year in the Premier League unless you're at the very highest level. Now, last season, I remember talking with loads of people about the need for a philosophical continuity, the need for pivoting towards something that we all want to see. High possession, high octane, attractive football. And then once you go in that direction, stick to it. Stick to the plan so that whoever's the next guy after this guy doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. Most of the players that they will have will already fit the next system, and then the next system, and the next system. Now, Ange Postecoglou might not be the guy for you. If you are Ange out, or you have Ange doubt, or if you're Levy out, or Levy doubts, or anything else, you might see the cracks in his system. You might see the fact that we started well but finished poorly, and on the tail end of 4 on the bounce, and say, this guy's been found out at this level. He himself has already said, maybe the Premier League is a step too far. He has massive belief in him and his abilities, and I believe in people that believe in themselves, always have, until there's a reason to know categorically that they're not of the level. And I don't think we know that with Ange yet, because he doesn't have the players he needs. My point of this kind of op-ed is that you have to give him what he needs within what we can do this summer, and that won't include world-class players, in all likelihood. I'd be amazed if it did, because there's too much work to do, too few pounds to do it with, and so he's going to be working within those measures. Even if it doesn't pan out at the start of next season, I still think you need to let the jelly set, let it pan out, and give him the full length of rope that's available to him to redress and construct the philosophy in his vision. What he is doing at Tottenham, let's remember, Ange Postecoglou has never been anywhere for a long period of time. He likes to move on. So I don't see him at Tottenham in 4 or 5 years, even if he wins a trophy. I think he likes new processes, new projects. But what he is responsible for here is the first stage of the final pivot in philosophy back to what we used to be. Now, he might be too gung-ho, too forward-thinking, and the next manager might inherit a certain philosophy where we still do possession-based stuff, we still do lovely movement with the ball, but maybe there's more consideration to the opposition, maybe there's more pragmatism, a slight tweak, maybe there's more a deeper line, whatever the next guy wants to do. Maybe there's more exploitative styles of manager, but if they keep the same principle that Ange has, then in an ideal world, whatever players Ange brings in this summer, most of them, not all of them, there'll always be some necessary tweaks, but most of them are going to be better fits for the next manager than the previous managers had when they inherited the previous squads. So for me, I think you have to let it plan out, because this is about building a foundation for the next 10 years, 20 years, and you have to pan out. Now, yesterday, I went with Henry onto Lee Judge's TV, We do a weekly show over there. It's brilliant fun. It's Arsenal versus Tottenham. A lot of banter, but we also do a lot of cross comparisons. And we were talking about whether or not Ange should be backed and why. And I said a lot of the same stuff on there that I've just said to you now. But going back to this Levy out tweet that I put out on Sunday, where I asked, what is it that ambition looks like to you? And people were saying world-class players. Well, Arsenal are in the process now of buying world-class players. They bought Declan Rice for 100 million quid. This summer, they're trying to go the extra step and getting, let's say, Alex Isak in. And he might cost 120 million pound. Now, Arsenal's revenues and Tottenham's revenues are not that dissimilar. Whoever finishes in Europe, in Champions League, will win the revenue race. Tottenham do better with, match day and events and things and commercial, but it's not that dissimilar in terms of revenues from one season to the next. What they did though with Arteta 4 years ago was stick to the plan, allow him to reshape the team in his vision, and they weren't buying players like Declan Rice then, they weren't looking at Alex Isak level players then, they were buying, for the most part, I know they made some mistakes with Pepe and they spent a lot of money on certain areas, but for the most part, they were buying players that were foundational cornerstones, young players that would fit the mould and build out the kind of cornerstone of an Arteta vision for the next few years. Players like Udogie, players like Ramsdale, players like Ben White. And that was enough for them to go from also rounds in Europe to Champions League. And then because of Stan Kroenke's investment, and again, took a bit more risk on, but also he'd paid down the stadium debt by then, took the debt private, and then added some more transfer debt onto the books. Something that you'd like to see Tottenham do in the future. We've already got too much debt on our books anyway right now with regards to stadium stuff, even though it's cheap interest, or relatively cheap interest. But if you as a fan who are Levy out that want to see more ambition, and ambition looks like spending £100 million on a player, well, you can't do that if you've got to buy 7 or 8 players every season. You can only do that when you're in a position like Arsenal are, where the foundations are in place. And as I say, the foundations are only in place for a manager if you give them enough time to do it. And Arteta had a lot of patience given to him. And I think Ange deserves just as much. Ange has won more in his career, managerially, than Arteta had before Arteta took the job. So if you're looking for proof that he knows what he's doing, and silverware is the example of that, then Ange has done that at every level that he's been at. It's not his fault yet that this is his first time at the highest level, but you take my point. Even if you are Ange out or Ange out, if your desire is to see world-class players playing in a Tottenham shirt again, and those world-class players are going to cost 80% of a realistic summer's transfer budget, then you're only going to see those players. That scenario only plays out if the vast majority of the squad is already in place. And the vast majority of the squad will only already be in place if you give a manager enough time to build it. We're not going to sign a world-class player this summer because we have too much to do in too many areas and too few pounds to spend. And as I said earlier, outgoings are going to be difficult, and I don't see us making as much money back on these players as some other people do. So, to me, the reason why you have to give Ange all the time in the world, or enough time to let it pan out, is because he is the foundation of a philosophical pivot where he can get most of the players in that will be good enough for the next manager, and hopefully the manager after that, remembering that every time you sign a young player on a 5-year deal, they are going to probably see out 2 or 3 managers in their time at the club. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Like, subscribe and comment. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you this afternoon for Henry Wright, and like, subscribe and comment. And as always, bye-bye.